Ever ask yourself what happens when a load of famous characters and creations from history are all put together in one room? Well, apparently, some really cool fights. The Record of Ragnarock is a popular manga series created by Shinya Umemura and Takumi Fukui, which had then been developed into a full-fledged anime in June of 2021, and that wasn't so good. The series' main plot is that every 1,000 years the Gods' Council assembles to decide the fate of humanity, and now the gods have come to the decision that humans are irredeemable and must go extinct. However, a Valkyrie named Brunhilde disagrees with this belief and challenges the gods to a battle in which the humans are armed with Valkyries, turned into divine weapons called Vulans, in a great battle of Ragnarok. A tournament which has 13 gods and 13 humans from history battling each other for the fate of humanity. Ah, by the way, the fights are to the death. Now, this video series is going to mainly be focused on reviewing and breaking down all the fights that occur. If you want more details about the plot and backstories and the art style and animation, go watch someone else's video on the series, because I'm just here to see two famous people slap each other. Since I am going through all the fights, spoilers obviously. And on also an important note, I will be taking historical inaccuracies and changes from the original lore of these characters that the author decided to make. Having these changes doesn't detract anything from the story, I just find it interesting to compare the fictional work to what it was based off. I really enjoy this series, so hope you enjoy this too. Now, first and foremost, the first creative change that was made by the author, Ragnarok is meant to be the end times for Norse mythology, where most characters wind up killing each other and the universe then resets. Not the case here. The first round begins with Thor, the Norse god of storms, symbol of strength, representing the gods, and Lubu, the three kingdoms' greatest warriors, squaring off. The gimmick of this fight is that the strongest of the gods versus the strongest of the humans, which is fair enough. Lubu is hailed as a warrior with no equal, and Thor is arguably the most powerful god, at least in the Norse mythology, and being able to pick up the world serpent, which is the size of the world, and again, represents strength in Norse mythology. The fight starts with the announcer introducing the fighters, and they make their respective entrances, with Thor coming in with a cool and brooding entrance. No need for any flashiness, his presence says it all. No, the point has to go to Lubu. Here was the hype of his entrance, his men drumming and chanting in unison, him running in on red hair, armed with his heavenly halberd, giving his entrance just a bit more impact. During the entrances, there are a few things to note. First off, obviously Thor's hammer is of comical size, but it does emphasize his numbing strength and how easily he wields it. Design-wise, Thor doesn't look historically accurate, but who cares? I just wish he kinda had a beard. Now, credit to where credit's due, they did make him ginger. Lubu looks more like a Japanese mobster, and of course isn't historically accurate. Of course, at the time, only the Emperor would have been allowed to have dragons on any of his clothing. His headpiece has pheasant tails on him, which aren't exactly accurate, but there are depictions in which he wears them, and of course, traditional Chinese operas would have actors wear them to represent warriors. The soldiers drumming and chanting were all accurate. Oftentimes when generals were dueling, or having a posturing contest, both sides would have their drummers help boost morale or intimidate the opponent. The stadium is filled with various humans throughout time, as well as various gods through various religions. Speaking of the various gods, let's talk about some of their designs. For Zeus, honestly, the way he's represented is actually pretty appropriate, but my main issue is with Aphrodite. Her having such a appealing form is more than appropriate, and also having a bunch of guys ogling her also makes sense. The design of the people surrounding her makes less sense. These were weird, expressionless, clay-faced men. Though that could be in reference to the fact that she can breathe life into statues, even making a girlfriend for Hercules in the old Disney universe. But there's no way that Aphrodite would surround herself with anything below a 10. This is the person who cheated on my boy Hephaestus for being ugly. I feel like it would have been more appropriate to replace all these gray humanoids with absurdly almost comical levels of handsomeness. But that is a very minor gripe. The next historical change that they made for this fight was that of Thor. Well, he's named the Thunder Berserker and is portrayed as a quiet and stoic man with an insane lust for battle. The real Thor, well, indeed a battle junkie, was a lot louder, boisterous, and cocky, with a short temper that often led to drinking and getting into fights. No, that is not to take anything away from his heroic side. He would defeat all his enemies who would oppose him and protect those around with all his might and will, and often try to do the right thing. Mostly. Also, an important difference is that Thor is known for protecting mankind from annihilation, not supporting it. And while he enjoys fighting, he isn't going to risk the world being destroyed for it. And of course, Thor isn't insane. I think. Debatable. As Lu Bu and Thor start staring each other down, from the crowd, Zhang Fei yells for Lu Bu to beat Thor. This is a strange take on the relationship between Zhang Fei and Lu Bu, for Zhang Fei in the Romance of Three Kingdoms hated Lu Bu, and out of the three sworn brothers, he would be the last one to support Lu Bu. Not to mention that in one battle, Lu Bu badly injured Zhang Fei, and also almost caused Zhang Fei's side to completely collapse.
二贼，你跑不了了，快下马受死！呸！那个贼吕布，你三爷爷来了！关将军、张将军呢？他们现在冲围里了。主公，小的亲眼看见张将军被吕布刺到马下，生死不明。杀回去！
Though, to be fair, was the fate of humanity, and still might have changed a little bit. Continuing on was the design of the characters. Liu Bei looked fine. Guan Yu looked like a terracotta warrior, which is more than appropriate seeing that he was later on deified as a god of war. Famous for being a large towering man with an always red face. Zhang Fei could have looked a bit bigger in comparison to Liu Bei, but the big ears, big eyes, and alcohol addiction was more than accurate. Other than that, Ceng Gong looked a bit younger than maybe he should have, and was given the short end of the stick from the way he was characterized as a big blubbering baby desperate to hype up his idol, a far cry from the honor-bound man who rose up to the ranks and died with honor. Brunhilde watches in anticipation as the horn for the battle to begin is sounded, and the two massive walls of meat approach each other, and begin exchanging blows. Matching each other in strength, Thor changes stances and begins to use both hands to wield his weapon. Suddenly a flashback appears and goes back to a time when Asgard was attacked by giants known as the Jotnar. The giants proceed to killing all those in Asgard and made it all the way to the World Tree. And then Thor came out and proceeded to murder every single Jotnar in his way. This legendary act cemented his legend among the gods. Cutting back to the present time, Thor strikes his hammer down in full force, only for Lu Bu to avoid the strike and rebound with a strike that rings true, gashing a massive slash through the chest of Thor. The crowd goes into a stunned silence at the fact that a mere human managed to wound a Thunder Berserker, something that not even the 66 Jotnar were able to do. Next, after some more dialogues, stare-downs, and further match hyping, we go back to Lu Bu's backstory. This flashback just further builds in the mystique of Lu Bu, explaining his accomplishments. I wonder if this will be delved in more in a future event. No, it should be noted that they changed the fact that Lu Bu begged for his life when he was captured into him crying of boredom from not having a worthy adversary. At this time, there were a few notable names that could have rivaled him in ability, including all of Lu Bu's 5 tiger generals, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Huanzong, Ma Chao the Splendid, and later on, my boy, Zhao Yun. Though this is easily forgiven due to the fact that this was done to build up Lu Bu's strength. Going back to the fight, Zeus, who's been watching this battle of the bulls, suddenly realizes that the Valkyries have been acting as divine weapons for the humans, allowing them to keep up with the gods. This cunning plan by Brunhilde evidently turns Zeus on. Accurate. But more importantly than that, Lu Bu, thanks to his divine weapon, is able to disarm Thor, and even destroys his gloves called Yungrep. This is another change from the actual myth of Thor, that the Yungrep were meant to protect Thor's hands due to the fact that the actual hammer's hilt was tampered with and became a lot shorter than intended, which required him to need these gloves. Here the gloves are actually meant to protect Mjolnir, not Thor. Thor then picks up his hammer and then throws it at Lu Bu. Actually a very common move for him. Again, Lu Bu managed to avoid it, but when it comes rebounding back to Thor's hands, and Lu Bu has to meet the full swing of Mjolnir, this ends up destroying Lu Bu's legs as he absorbs the hit. As Thor goes for the finishing blow, out comes red hair, and with this, the crowd begins to will Lu Bu back up, and he then mounts red hair, the greatest warrior under the heavens, and the greatest steed under the heavens, reunite and become one for one last duel. And all this time, Thor watches while chomping on the bit. Lu Bu readies his Sky Piercer for one final attack. Thor readies Mjolnir to meet the mortal. The two greatest warriors in their respective worlds meet head to head, power on power. Legendary weapon against legendary weapon. A battle of wills. With a blinding flash they connect, willpower equal. All that was left was to see who would falter first, and what breaks first turns out to be Lu Bu's Voland, the Valkyrie that chose to fight with him. The heavenly halberd breaks first. With his only weapon gone, there's nothing left to protect Lu Bu from the shockwave, crippling the man for good. While he still lives, the fight is over. But Lu Bu chooses to face death with a smile, and charges right back in. Thor is more than happy to end it all. The fight ends with Thor victorious, and Lu Bu's men proceeding to die along with their general. Thus concludes round 1. I really enjoyed this entire fight. From the entrances to the ending, I think it all worked pretty damn well. This fight was pretty straightforward. Two big sweaty men slamming into one another until one of them breaks. No real strategy, no real power, it's just two monsters tearing into each other, with every hit and every move carrying a monstrous amount of force behind it. This fight not only sets the plot, but drives the story and gives the main idea of how all these characters will be involved. Obviously, we see the gods and their low opinions of us mere mortals, and how they slowly stare in disbelief at how humanity tries to defy their fate. Slowly getting more and more invested into these fights, which I think will be part of the reason why humanity eventually will get saved at the end. Or maybe they all die, who knows. This also does great for Brunhilde's character. We can see that she's so desperately driven to stick it to the gods that she lets her emotions get the best of her. Throughout the fight, we could see that Thor and Lu Bu were physically on par with one another. And at the end of the fight, what it came down to was their weapons. And while a Valkyrie is a divine weapon and considered a deity, a Valkyrie would still pale in comparison when it comes to matching blow for blow against the strongest weapon in her own mythology. And with Lu Bu, of all people using her, there was only one way she was going to be used in this fight. Later on, we'll see characters battle physically stronger opponents using different strategies. Sending one of those characters out might have changed the result, or at least saved their heavy hitter for later. Brunhilde should have seen that, but she was way too tunnel vision with the revenge to do so. It's a character flaw, and this shows up constantly throughout the series. And it just adds on to the interest of the series, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Overall, I think this is a great series, and you should pick up the manga, and maybe avoid the anime. Anyways, I might make another video on this series, so stay tuned. Also, check out my other stuff. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe, ding that bell, blah blah blah, and until next time, this is Captain Bill signing out. See ya!